Welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. I'm so glad that you made the decision to click on this podcast and put your earbuds in and listen to the sound of me. That didn't come out right. Let me rewind that. I'm really, really glad that you made the choice to be part of our community, our online, global, ever expanding community that we are all a part of. And that's how we stay connected. My name's Dayal, and I'm here with Kishore Chandra. Our other normal co-host, Achyuta Gopi, isn't with us this morning, at least not this far. She might just pop in later. But this is your daily Bhakti Center podcast where we really just check in with each other each morning. It's live 9 a.m. here in the East Coast of the United States, New York City. And we find that life is hard. Life is a little confusing. Life is lonely sometimes. And we live in a world of continuous online connection and so many ways in which we have insights to other people's lives and them into ours. And at the same time, it can be hard to connect in meaningful ways to be seen and to talk about
Mm.
real topics. And so we've created this space for us to connect with each other on a regular basis and feel that sense of the Bhakti Center is your spiritual home. And we want to expand that to the virtual airwaves. So we're here and we love you. And whatever you're going through, you're going to make it. You're not alone. We're with you. And I love you, Kishore. How are you doing?
Oh, I love you, Daya. I'm doing good. I've been getting bad sleep these past 3 nights. I think it's the
Mm,
moon. I'm blaming it on the full moon.
it's a total moon. Lane's like,
Okay,
yes.
good. I'm glad. I'm glad I'm getting some recognition for that because I really don't know what's going on. Like my routine before bed is always like reading sweet Krishna stories and I'm like only eating khichdi. I'm doing all the things right. Then I get in bed and I'm just like, can't
I
sleep.
had that incident last night. I got up and I just like it was working at like 11 o'clock. I was like, I might as well get something done. But it's where they get the word lunatic from
Yes, it is.
because
Indeed.
when the full moon is out, just things go gray.
They go cray cray. But another L word, I like that you mentioned this word in your little intro, lonely, because you wrote a
Mm,
post recently about loneliness
I
or
did.
being alone, and I really liked it.
It was a cry for help.
I, I really liked it because you touched on the difference between being lonely and being alone and really being able to be alone with yourself. And I feel like if you live in a big city, like New York, it's one of those cities where like you can constantly be surrounded by people and constantly be like, out and about, but at the same time feel very lonely. And it's such
Yeah.
a weird, interesting dichotomy. And it's so crazy. Like when you go on the subway, or when you go anywhere, literally anywhere in public, like people are quote unquote alone, right? They're with themselves, but everyone's just like engaged with the phone or with this or with that. And I liked how you were saying in your post how, what, like, I can't remember word for word, you can say it better, but just like not distracting ourselves with those things, like what does it
Mm,
mean to really be with ourselves? And I feel like there's a lot to unpack there. I don't know if you wanted
yeah.
to speak a little more about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Um, I'll read what I wrote.
Yes, please.
I wrote that um, the difference between being alone and the difference between having alone time and feeling lonely is my ability or inability to spend meaningful time with myself. This means that when I'm physically alone, I need to make sure I'm emotionally and mentally present with myself as well. If I can't appreciate or even look forward to my own company without sending my mind or heart somewhere else, TV, social media, news, etc., I'm likely going to be unable to sustainably feel comfortable in someone else's company. And my search for a relationship may become an attempt to run away from my own self, which can make me feel lonely, even if I'm surrounded by people. And the short little addendum I wrote in the caption was having alone time doesn't have to be the same as being lonely. In fact, I can find that quality alone time is sometimes the best cure for loneliness. And
Mm,
it was inspired by, I think it was Thomas Merton who said, and maybe I mentioned this yesterday, I don't know, is that the cure for loneliness is solitude.
mm,
And I think that, um, the idea of being alone or spending time alone with ourselves, like having alone time, our me, we talk about this, having some me time. But then what do we do with our me time? If I'm watching TV or social media or news or even reading sometimes, depending. And I'm not saying that any of these things are bad. I'm just saying, are you really spending, what does it mean to spend time alone with yourself?
mm,
And we talked about this also a little bit yesterday of like checking in with ourselves on a regular basis and what that means. But if I'm watching TV, I'm not alone with myself. I'm absorbed in something else. I'm not even present. If I'm on social media, I'm anywhere but here with me. I'm looking at other people's lives and now I'm comparing where I'm at to them and whatever maybe, whether it's positive or negative. Again, it's not a bad thing. Even like, you know, I I remember when, can I tell a story? I'm launching into something.
go for it. Go for it.
I I when I was living in an ashram, I used to get a lot of headache, migraine headaches. I get them less now. I used to get a lot of migraine headaches. It turned out the reason is that I was getting a lack of sleep. Since we're talking about not getting good sleep. And it's still the case. Like if there's one thing, like I push my body to the limits, not not intentionally, but whether it's my diet or my whatever to work, and I'm working a lot. But the one thing I can't escape is sleep. Like if I get low sleep continuously, like my body will shut down and be like, we are going no further. Um, but at the time, I didn't make that connection. And so I saw an Ayurvedic doctor who also specializes in Western medicine. And he was asking me questions. He says, well, lack of headaches normally come from either poor vision or stress. And I was like, well, I don't have any stress. And he was like, well, sometimes stress is things that you're necessarily conscious of. And he started asking me questions about my childhood and my relationship with my parents. And I was like, what is this, a therapy session? And but he was saying like there's stress. And long story short, without getting into all of the details, there's a whole conversation we had about my deceased father,
Mm,
and finishing conversations with him that I didn't have when he was alive,
mm,
which is another story. But what he mentioned was that, you know, he asked this very question. He was like, in order to discover unconscious areas of stress, you have to spend time alone with yourself.
mm,
And he said, and that doesn't mean, and he said, not reading. He said, not even like chanting japa or like doing, like a mantra meditation practice. It was like, he was like, just laying down with yourself, just
mm,
going for a walk in nature, not listening to music or a podcast or something like that because you're thinking about something outside of yourself. And so it's like, where do you go to just see what surfaces, the feelings, thoughts, and emotions, and then have a dialogue with that?
mm,
What's coming up on a regular basis, like what feeling is coming up, where's your mind getting absorbed, like what is there, and for some of us, I recognize that's not always safe. We've talked about that, and sometimes like it's scary, but that may point to like, okay, wow, I'm living with trauma, and if I don't deal with that, like it's going to follow me around wherever I go. These memes going out right now, if you don't deal with your childhood trauma now, it will show up in your romantic relationships.
mhm,
um and so, but I just think that concept is where the post kind of came from, and that ability to actually like, what does it mean to spend time alone with myself, even when I'm physically alone? If I'm mentally and emotionally rocketing my consciousness somewhere else, I'm not serving the purpose that it needs, and I'll always feel a little jittery and lonely.
mm. Yeah, yeah, so much good stuff there to unpack. I don't know where I want to start, but for some reason, what's coming to my mind, well, I guess in the addendum, or where did you write it? I don't know if it was in the addendum, if it was in the actual post, but something about like,
A caption, addendum is a very fancy way of saying caption.
yeah, I know this thing about relationship. I'm just when you wrote it
It was
um,
in the post.
in the post. Yeah, it's interesting about relationship because we grow up with a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of like false. advertising in a sense about
Mm,
relationships and their function and how they're supposed to look, what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to work, you know. And we grew up seeing all these ridiculous romantic comedies that always like end happy and well and etc. And something that I've learned, at least in relationship, I mean, the first step really is like solitude and how do I be alone with myself in a healthy way. And then, like, when you're in relationship, and that goes with like anyone, I think. Of course, romantic relationship is more because like you're with the person all the time, but it's like time doesn't have to be
mm,
constantly like filled, with
mm.
things. And I think that that's super important because it's like, I feel like in this world that we live in, it's very like production based, like how much I can put out, how much I can do, how much I can say, how much I can prove, how much all this kind of stuff. And there's such a beauty in just like being and
Yeah,
like you said, like walking in nature without anything in my ears, without a podcast, without just sitting down, just laying in bed,
yeah.
um, I remember my acupuncturist when he told me to do this homework of just being with myself and being passive. That's what I did. I
Mm,
just like laid on my couch and I felt like the urges to like go and grab something or go and do something. And I was just like, no, I'm just gonna lay here. I'm just gonna lay here. And it was so nice. It was
mm.
really nice. I didn't fall
Yeah.
asleep either. I was awake. I was like, okay. I think that writing is a really good tool. Writing
Yes.
is a super amazing tool for that because I used to do it a lot and I've been trying to make it a point to get back to it. I haven't gotten back to it
Mm,
just yet, but I used to do it a lot. And I think that there's really nothing like being alone with yourself without the phone, without the podcast, without whatever, like going for a
yeah.
nice walk, feeling whatever it is that you're feeling, and then sitting down and writing about it and like processing with yourself. Like that's where that dialogue is happening. Where
Yeah.
like you were saying, I really loved what you were saying about like when you're doing that, when you're with yourself, then you're able to discover or at least start to uncover, that's a better word, hidden stress, and
Yeah.
we need to address that or else it's gonna follow us. Or else we're
It's
not gonna be
falling.
able to sleep at night.
Unless you can't sleep at night. Oh my God, I'd figure out why I'm not sleeping. Um, I was thinking because also in the 13th chapter of the Gita, there's this really beautiful list that is given um, about knowledge, and there's
Mm,
this big long list of things that it's quite interesting because the list isn't it almost kind of it rephrases the way we think of knowledge, for
mm,
example, um, and as something that is we think I study something and then I learn it. But then
mm,
there's this also in spiritual life, there's an aspect of like I remove like my heart, my consciousness is like a canvas on which, there in which sometimes things are painted and I have to sort of or it's like a container to
mm,
receive knowledge.
mm,
And but I need to like actually do some house cleaning. It's like receiving a guest, you
mhm,
know? And if my home or if my space isn't cleared properly to receive a guest, there's not going to be any space for it. And so there's this whole thing that talk about like the list of knowledge. It has humility, pridelessness, ahimsa, nonviolence, simplicity, tolerance, self-control, steadiness, cleanliness, like those kinds of things are in this list. And it's like actually intelligence is not like academic, but actual real wisdom comes from a lifestyle of softening and tending to the field of our heart in
mm,
such a way that we can actually receive divine gifts and knowledge and realization that are coming to us through life's experiences.
mm,
And one of the things on that list is it's translated in different ways. One way it's translated as aspiring to live in a solitary place or attraction to secluded places. And
mm,
I was looking at this Sanskrit word. It says anabhishvanga,
mm,
being without association. And
mm,
so I imagine like, we have like sanghas like when you're together, but then there's also that need for us to be almost like without sangha, like on our own, without association. And like it's in those moments that we give ourselves time to really process what we're going through so that we can enter into the world of relationship from a place of I-ness, from a
Mm,
place of like, this is who I am, this is where I'm bringing, as opposed to um yeah, as opposed to a lack of clarity or a confusion around who we are, what we think about things, and having a stable sense of identity. It's really where a stable sense of identity comes from. Our
mm,
stable sense of identity comes from the ability to spend meaningful alone time with ourselves. And I
mm,
think that it's built into Vedic literatures in the Bhagavad Gita itself of like, you got to be able to step away sometime and appreciate your own alone time, because that's just as you were saying, that's where you process life, that's where you become able to discover your emotions, your desires, your experiences, and things start to surface. And so I was just appreciating that it's kind of like it's built in there as almost like as
mm.
a spiritual practice, as an integral part of our spiritual lives. And it's something that I struggle with tremendously. I mean, I can't even get through a Zoom meeting without checking, whatever's coming through. I'm really worried about humanity and society today. Like, we have lost the ability to just like have a conversation without feeling like, I got to check three other things during the, and
Mm,
it's not even like we talked about this on a digital detox once. It was like, when we gave up our phones for a few days, it's like, we just get to the habits like, okay, I've checked my email and my social media and my text and my WhatsApp. I checked the news channels I look at. I check this. There's nothing left to check. What do I do? I mean, let me check my email again. It's like, it's not even like I'm expecting something. It's like, imagine if you saw somebody just walking out of their house, is constantly going to their mailbox,
mm.
just check and see if anything came. Like, are you expecting a package? No, I'm not expecting anything. Not expecting anything. I'm just got nothing else going. I'm just going. It's like, and it's like, what are you doing? It's like, and I just think that we're checking these things without expecting anything, because what else am I just have to, like you said, I have to fill the time. And
And I think it really comes down to, because you mentioned the sense of I and who I am. And I really think that it comes down to the false ego versus like a healthy ego. Because with the false ego, you know, it is very much nourished or fed, let's use a better word. It's very much like fed and filled up by this supposed imaginary feeling that like I'm important. It's like when we're checking these things, our inboxes or our stories or whatever, it's like there's a sense of like, oh, this validated me in some way. I'm somebody. And there's such an emptiness in that, actually, because it's clear. It's clear that that stuff is fleeting. It's clear that that stuff doesn't work. It's clear that a deep stable sense of identity doesn't come from that. And then I see here in the chat, yeah, just this word distraction, and we're actually being distracted of really diving into like who we
mm,
really are, like who are we really. And I really love what Dana wrote, and I want to read it because I think it's
read it.
so sweet and perfect and real. She said, I think there's almost a grieving that happens when you realize
Mm,
how these conditioned ways of being aren't helping us, but actually perpetuating more trauma or more running away from self, from feelings, from our heart callings. So sometimes it might not feel right at first, but consistency and learning to feel that is the key. Sometimes harder said than done, depending on how much trauma or things we've been numbing out with distraction. And I think that she really, thank you, Dana. You really hit the nail on the head, because it's just like, ooh, it's just like when we start to realize that this stuff doesn't work, like you're saying, Doyle, that like I've reached the end of my, I've reached the end. Like I checked everything, I checked my Instagram, my email, and you're still there. You're still there, kind of just like, now what do I do? You know? And I feel like what Dana's saying about this grieving when we realize that these conditioned ways don't work, it's it's scary, actually. And grief is scary, and grief is kind of like, ugh, it's an intense process. And to not go through that grief, I feel like there's a lot of convincing ourselves that maybe it will work. Maybe if I just check one more time, it'll feel good. And maybe if I just look, maybe someone did send me an email, or like maybe there is something for me to do. And there's like this sense of like, oh,
Mm.
I don't want to go through that grief process. I don't want to go through this process because it's kind of like a what's the word I'm looking for? It's a bit of a, not a bit, it's a paradigm shift from this contemporary situation that we're living in to something else, right? And that can be a little destabilizing in identity because we're so fixed in how we function in this society, right? I check all these things, I have lots of opinions, et cetera, et cetera. And to go through that grief process of realizing like, actually this isn't helping me figure out who I am at all, and it's distracting me from my trauma, from my hurts. It's a scary process that takes a lot of courage, actually. And I feel like that's not being spoken about most of the days, right? Like we're not acknowledging that a lot of strength and courage and people need to be empowered to go into those places and spaces, right? And
Mm.
so thank you, Dana, for writing that. Yeah, yeah. I'm just reading what Dana wrote. Thank you so much.
Um, Thank you for reading it. I was going to read that if you weren't going to read it, so I'm glad you did.
Yeah.
Um, the thought that comes to my mind, I'm recognizing I was gonna talk about this maybe like it would be a whole episode, but because I was realizing I'm realizing I do a lot of emotional eating at night. I've kind of been realizing that like I don't always eat during the day. I'll skip lunch and then I'll eat lunch, but then it's not even like I'm hungry. It's like I just need snacks or I need a treat or I need, and it's like, and it's the most random of things like pretzels and then a popsicle and then frozen pineapple and then some. I love Hearts of Palm. That's one of my favorite things. You like Hearts of Palm?
I love Hearts of Palm.
So what? It's like my wife is like, "What? How does all that go together?" It's like I'm just doing one thing at a time. But what happens is you go to the fridge and you open it up and there's nothing there, and so you close it, and then you turn around and walk over to the cupboard and you open it up and there's nothing there, and it's like maybe I should go back to the fridge. And then you go back, open the fridge, and it's like, maybe let me check the freezer. And then it's like, let me go back to the cupboard. And you're like spending 5 minutes going back and forth, and like, you already checked, there's nothing there, you know? And I think it's that same thing. It's like, are you expecting to find something that wasn't there the first time?
Mhm.
And I think it's almost like this if you have this visual of somebody just like in their kitchen, like opening the fridge and closing the door, then walking over to the cupboard, opening it and closing the door, then walking over to the same fridge and opening it and closing it. It's like that with our devices. It's like opening up email, closing it, going over to Instagram, opening it, closing it, going back to my email, opening it, going to text, and it's just like, what am I looking for? What is
Mm,
it that I'm looking for? I'm
mm,
just emotionally grazing for munchies, and it's like, what, and it's just like, and it doesn't leave us feeling fulfilled, and it kind of just leaves us sort of like, yeah, you spend a lot of time, or you'll find all those memes about like, I don't watch movies on Netflix. I just spend hours, searching for what movie I think I might watch. you know
mm.
I
I am
never
so guilty of that.
never make a decision. And I just think that, yeah, it's just something to be like, what is it that I'm either, it's like, what am I looking for, or what am I running away from or escaping?
Mm,
And I find that, it's almost kind of like building into this practice of devotional life, the alone time that I spend with myself. And, if it's 5-10 minutes a day, that's very powerful and helpful. Um, And I'd love to hear from Kimberly. We're wrapping up our time here today. If we can get some takeaways from Kimberly, if anybody has any takeaways, they can share them in the chat. We'll read them out. And then Kishore and I can share what we're walking away with.
mhm.
If anybody wants to share, you can put it in the chat. And Kimberly, let's hear it.
The cure for loneliness is solitude. There is beauty in just being. And when we tend to our hearts, our consciousness, our internal home, we prepare ourselves to receive divine gifts and uncover a stable identity of ourselves.
Thank you so much, Kimberly. Love that. Kishore, what are you walking away with?
I love how Kimberly just puts it all together. I'm just like, did we even say that? I don't know where she
Yeah, we didn't say any of
we
that.
didn't
She's
say
like,
any of
she's
that.
like, let me articulate. You guys were running all over the place. Let me try to pull this into something coherent.
Rachna saying time doesn't have to be constantly filled. And Pasha says, my takeaway, walk away from the fridge.
Walk away from the fridge.
My takeaway is that I really like how this is all tying together, because while you were talking, Dayal, about the fridge, it brought me back to the conversation that kind of started all this, which was like the juice cleansing and cleansing. And so it really is clear to me. I guess what I'm walking away with is that sometimes to figure out what we're looking for, because obviously we're looking for something, opening the fridge and checking our inbox, sometimes we just need to be alone and strip things away a little bit, like get really simple, go on a detox, go on a cleanse, get rid of a bad habit, whatever it might be. You need to strip things away a little bit to really see, like, wait, what is it that I'm actually looking for? I think that's a really important question. Turn everything
Beautiful.
off, Dana
Dana
says.
says turn everything off. For me, I'm walking away. I really love this. I really love this word in the Gita, anabhishvanga, being without association, or being, you know, that kind of sense. And I think that's something. It's something so powerful, learning to be alone with ourselves. For me, I'm just kind of taking that concept of like, you know, I'm just taking that concept home with me of like being okay, being alone by myself at times, and building that in as a practice, as a way to thinking that the cure for my FOMO, or my turning FOMO into JOMO, the fear of missing out to the joy of missing out. Lieshwar, I'm walking away with two questions. What am I looking for, and what am I running away from? Beautiful, beautiful question. JOMO.
JOMO.
Yeah. So love you guys so much. Really, really, really appreciate all of you. Please be well. Please take care. Please take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. And we look forward to seeing you again very soon. Bye-bye, everybody.